Dr. John Minardi. I'm thrilled that he could join me after a busy practice day. I actively practicing there in Toronto, as well as all his the teaching that you do all over the world. For those that don't know John Minardi, those that are hiding under a rock somewhere, John teaches for the ICPA. He also teaches Thompson technique as well as practical neurology, and does some of his own independent keynote speaking for conferences all over the world. So I've taken some of your seminars as well as your workshops, and right now, I'm not saying this isn't going to change, but you're my favorite chiropractor.
Oh, you're the best, buddy. I appreciate that. I'll take it, Nick. I'll take it.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to dive in and really, we did a quick video clip interview down there at Sherman Lyceum, but I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper for my own personal interest, but also I'm always about offering confidence to young chiropractors as well as students. And I know you've got the same mission.
Sure.
Every time you fly off somewhere, that's actually what you say is I'm off to Kansas. Right. Or Paris or whatever to increase confidence. And that confidence is not just arbitrary confidence, it's confidence in correcting subluxations.
Correct.
On the clinical side as well as on the neurological or physiologic side.
Right.
Very close to my own mission. You're doing some phenomenal things. So I've got a few basic questions written down. I'm sure we're going to go in
sure.
directions. But just to start out, I know that part of your emphasis is on the chronic stress response as it's related to the vertebral subluxation. And a lot of things put us into stress, but neurologically, when the stress response kicks in due to subluxation, it then spills over into the rest of the system.
Correct.
And I remember clearly you saying, and it makes perfect sense to me, that when we're under chronic stress, really even in acute stress, the body more or less shuts down reproduction, immunity, and digestion, because when we're in a fight or flight mode, we don't require those functions. So chronic stress, though, which is very, over the long term, very deleterious to the system, I know I'm not going to do it justice, but I just want to lead into what I've taken from you and then ask for you to expand on it. That increased nociception in and around the vertebra, decreased mechanoreception triggers a chronic stress response in the brain, right?
Well, yeah, almost correct. Excessive nociception and excessive aberrant proprioception. So it's not that there's less proprioceptive information going to the brain. There's also a lot of it, but it's inaccurate because the vertebrae and the joints and the muscles are not moving properly. There's an issue with them, so that sends that information to the brain.
All right, very good. So otherwise called by some disafferentation.
Correct. Correct.
And so when that occurs in and around the spinal joints and ascends into the brain, what are the, and I know this is a big question, so you can dumb it down as much as you want to, simplify it. What are some of the pathways or the ascending tracks, and then some of the brain regions that are immediately affected?
Right. So if we talk about proprioception itself, all proprioceptive information has to go to the cerebellum. So conscious and unconscious, everything that's dealing with movement has to go to the cerebellum. That's for sure. So you're looking at the spinocerebellar tracts and the dorsal columns that are sending most of that information to the brain. Now, the big thing with the cerebellum that I would like everyone to kind of remember is that basically has the information of what is actually occurring in the body. So it's basically just whatever's happening in the body. If things are moving properly, if there's some type of abnormal movement, that information gets sent to the cerebellum. The important reason to know that is because the cerebellum just holds the information. Then it relays it through the thalamus to the cortex. The cortex has the information that's basically our reference point, what should be. So if the information in the cerebellum is the same as the cortex, then that's normal movement. Everybody's happy. But in a subluxation's case, when it's sending aberrant information to the cerebellum, when that gets compared to our reference point in the cortex says, that's no good. It's bad information. It's not the information that should be there. So the cortex then sends a corrective response through the body, and that corrective response is usually a flexed posture. That's why everybody is walking into our offices looking like the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Right. And so, as you've said, it's not all our habit patterns, it's not all leaning over our devices, but it's also
Correct.
neurological flexor response.
Correct. Well, the big thing that people should know is that the texting and the computer stuff, those are aggravating factors, but they're not causative factors. The brain is always putting the body into flexion as a protective measure, and then things like texting, computers, all that stuff, that aggravates that bad neurological pattern. Now that's proprioception. Nociception is a little different.
Now, I've understood from some of the research where they discuss the nucleus tractus solitarius, that sometimes this also affects the cardiorespiratory system because the posture that we're in,
Sure.
as you said, doesn't match the cardiac output, blood pressure, heart rate, and respiration. So the body adapts to the posture it thinks that we're in. Is that correct?
I don't know if it adapts to the posture it thinks. So you got to remember, posture is a direct adaptation from what the brain is getting. So if the brain is getting bad information, it basically says, okay, let's adapt the body, and it puts you in a flexed position. Because of that flexed position, it decreases things like cardiac output, the expansion of the rib cage, things of that nature. So, for example, you can't expand the rib cage to a full degree. You can't take a deep breath. Obviously, heart rate has to increase, blood pressure has to increase because you're not getting enough oxygenated blood into the tissue, so everybody else is working harder. So it's almost like a slippery slope or a cascade of events that happens. Another big thing that affects that is the nociceptive information that's going to the brain, because that'll end up tipping off the sympathetic nervous system through the hypothalamus, and then that's going to cause hormonal release, which can cause things like increased blood pressure, increased temperature, or regulation, things of that nature. So you got to remember there's many things going to the brain at the same time, and then the brain has to react to all this information, and then it sends adaptive processes into the body.
So you're saying that part of that adaptation is a change in the endocrine system?
Correct. That's a big part of what's going on.
Okay, so long-term increased cortisol will have ill effects on the entire body, right?
Correct. And the thing is that what everyone, I think what a lot of critics, when they hear things like this, they're like, oh, what you're saying is that it shuts down the immune system 100%. That's actually not what I'm saying. That's not what anyone else has said either. What cortisol does is shuts down aspects of the immune system, aspects of the GI system, and aspects of the reproductive system. And the more chronic those stress hormones stay in the body, the more those systems don't function properly long term. So, like so many of us chiropractors in our offices over the years have adjusted females who said, oh, I've never been able to get pregnant. People say I'm infertile. I tried all the infertility treatment, still can't get pregnant. And then lo and behold, after a year of chiropractic care, boom, they're pregnant. And then people are like, oh my God, wow, that's a miracle, this and that. But in actuality, what we're doing by correcting those subluxations is changing the information going to the brain, so the brain doesn't have to constantly release stress hormones. It now says, oh, no need to do that. So if I'm not releasing stress hormones, I don't have to allocate energy to muscles and brain and heart. I can reallocate the energy back to reproduction, back to the immune system, and back to GI system. That's where we're powerful as chiropractors, is we have a direct effect on that endocrine system.
So what I hear you saying, and I totally agree with this, is that chiropractic philosophy makes a basic assumption that we were made for health. We were made to be able to adapt to our external environment, and when that's not happening, something's amiss with the system. We can't. I've read in various sources that the vast majority of all the things that we suffer, all the chronic diseases that we're seeing in Western civilization are really more or less lifestyle issues. Most of them are.
Correct. And I mean, that comes directly from Bruce Lipton's work, who was a cellular microbiologist out of Stanford University. And I've seen him speak many times at different events, and he's very clear on this. He openly says that only 5% of all diseases come from a genetic factor, that over 90% to 95% are environmental. What are you doing? What are you eating? Things of that nature. So vast majority of diseases could be prevented if we just lived a more salutogenic lifestyle. Right. But because we don't, that's where all these things are coming from.
And I probably should clarify something right up front, talk about critics. You're not saying, I know I'm not saying, and I'm absolutely positive you're not saying that chiropractic treats those diseases.
No, I don't. I appreciate you bringing that up, because what I need everybody to know is that chiropractic treats nothing. What we do is add to the salutogenic model, which basically means the chiropractic adjustment affects the nervous system positively, and let me be even more clear than that, it affects the brain in a positive way, and the brain itself releases the hormones that are needed for the body to adapt properly. That's what we're doing. So at no point in time would I ever say chiropractic cures infertility, or chiropractic cures heart disease, or any of that kind of stuff. What I'm saying is that you're sending the positive information to the brain so the brain can recalibrate and then do what it has to do into the body. And that's going to vary from one person to another, right?
So really, in a way, we've always had this high vision for chiropractic since the days of BJ. And yet, I think this increases our vision even greater, that it's not about improving this disease or that disease, while some of those things will take care of themselves when the body's functioning better.
Right.
But it's about allowing the brain to actually express its own innate potential, correct?
Well, exactly. The thing is, the brain is going to do something based on the information it gets. So whatever information it gets from its senses, that's why it's called sensory afferent information. Everything going to the brain is coming from your senses in some capacity. If that's negative information, so if you see someone approaching you with a baseball bat, you're going to think, holy cow, I'm going to protect myself. That is negative information coming to the brain, so you go into a flex position. That's an adaptive process that the brain did to protect your body. No different than when you're subluxated and it's sending bad information to the brain. That brain information says, holy cow, I'm getting bad information. Let's contract muscles and put them in a flex position to protect the body. It's very similar. Now reverse that. If you saw a friend that you haven't seen in 10 years and he's coming at you with a big hug, and your visual system thinks, oh, that's Nick, I haven't seen him in 5 years, let me give him a hug. You're not in that flex position anymore. Now you're in an extended position, because that's positive information going to the brain. When we adjust someone, we replace that negative information with positive information, so the brain doesn't think, oh, I better flex, I can relax a little bit. See, what we always have to remember is the brain's going to do something based on the information it gets. So if that information is negative, it's going to put you in protective adaptation. If that information is positive, it doesn't have to put you in protection anymore. It can put you in relaxation. It can put you in a positive state. The brain is very smart, so it just does based on what the information is getting. That's the thing.
Let me have you respond to something I just read from, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Matthew Alvord.
I'm not, sorry.
More or less a chiropractic philosopher. He is out there in Minnesota, great doc, and focused almost exclusively on chiropractic philosophy, and
it's great.
comes out with a lot of nuggets. Something he said today I loved, and I just want your reaction to it, because it's in keeping with what you just said on a philosophical basis, and maybe you can translate this into science. He said, natural man is designed to be healthy and adapt to his environment. That's the state when we're in our natural state, which in part means unsubluxated. Right. Our spine is not interfering with our nervous system. We're meant to be able to adapt to the world that we live in.
Correct. 100% right. And this is really If I could put the science behind that, I agree 100% with the statement, number one. And number two, that's why the acute stress response is a healthy response for you, because if something negative does happen in your environment, the acute stress response is part of your immune system's innate response to take care of the situation, get you out of a bad situation. The thing is that stressor is supposed to be gone at some point in time. So the stress response was really only supposed to be there for a short period of time. If it's gone, all the systems go normal again. Everybody's happy again. It's when those stressors don't go away. See, like when you're subluxating, it's constantly sending bad information to the brain. Let's pretend you're in a bad marriage and you're constantly getting stressed about that. You have a sick child at home that you have to constantly take care of. You went to these Iraq wars and saw your brother die or something like that. These stressors aren't going away anymore. So you're juggling all of that environmental stress load now. So the body can adapt to a lot of that. So think of it like juggling 5 tennis balls. You're juggling them, you can do it. But if I just keep adding more and more tennis balls as more and more stress, at some point, no matter how great your body is, it's going to hit a point called allostatic load. That's the point at which you can't maintain balance anymore. And that's when disease starts to happen. So that's like the last tennis ball that I throw to you when you're already juggling 12, that 13 tennis balls just too much. And so everything starts to fall apart. So your body can adapt, but we all have a breaking point, unfortunately.
Right. I love that. So with that, I'm going to kind of get a little bit more, I'm going to ask you to drill down a little bit on that. And maybe just quickly give me highlights or give me 3 of your favorite studies related to subluxation or related to stress, or directly related to chiropractic. I know we're both a fan of Dr.
Sure.
Heidi Havoc out of New Zealand.
For sure.
Well, let me just first ask you about one particular thing little fact that I quoted recently, and I've heard you discuss it, and I think I'm getting my facts mixed up.
Okay.
So you can clarify this. I recently said that the chiropractic adjustment resets the prefrontal cortex by 20%, but I think I heard you use the numbers 50%. Which one is correct?
I wouldn't have used a number specifically, because what the research has said is it doesn't reset the prefrontal cortex. What the research is saying is that it activates it. Okay. So the important thing about that, let's talk about a couple of studies. If you look at Ogura's work from 2011, and for anybody watching here, just to make it easy, I'm going to send you the reference for these studies, and maybe you can list them underneath this video or something like that, if anybody wants to read them on its own. But anyway, Ogura's work was excellent because he put people in PET scans, and they adjusted them, and they wanted to see what happened to the brain. And what they found was the stress area of the brain, so the limbic system, decreased in activity, but the area of the brain for executive functioning, the prefrontal cortex, increased in activity. The other interesting thing they found in this particular study is that they measured something called salivary amylase, which is a chemical inside of the mouth that breaks down carbohydrates. Now you got to think to yourself, why is this relevant? Because salivary amylase is a known stress marker, because when you're under stress, the body needs more energy. So what you do is crave carbs, crave sugars, because you need that energy to handle the stress energy, right? That stress load, I should say. So what they also found is with the chiropractic adjustment, not only did it decrease activation of the stress center and increase activation of the prefrontal cortex, it decreased salivary amylase in the saliva. Why is that important? Because it shows you that every time you're adjusting people, you're decreasing stress markers inside the body, because the subluxation is causing stress to the brain. That's the first study. Second thing I want people to really know, there's another study out of the University of Barcelona in 2014 from a researcher by the name of Plaza-Manzano. And what these guys did was they looked at the hormone oxytocin. Now, if you're not familiar with oxytocin, oxytocin is a known good hormone of the brain, also known as the love hormone, the bonding hormone. But the big thing you got to know about oxytocin is oxytocin decreases stress. So the more oxytocin that gets released into the blood, the more it decreases the stress response, okay? What did they find? They found that the chiropractic adjustment increases oxytocin. You understand? So the thing is that, and that study also showed that it also increases cortisol short term, the first 20 minutes. And if you look at back in immunology, anytime you have an immune spike at first, cortisol gets released. But the thing is that it's a short term release. We're looking at long term cortisol we want to decrease, right? Because remember, cortisol short term is to help you. The stress response is to help you short term. It's the long-term release that's very detrimental to our health. So the big thing about Plaza study, that's the takeaway point, is that oxytocin increases. And the reason I like this study so much is it shows that we have a direct effect on the endocrine system, which is something I've been talking about for a long time. But this study actually shows it because they measured a hormone, and a good hormone, and measured and seen that the measurement increased. Now the last study that people should know about is from Dr. Havoc and her research colleagues, and that is the prefrontal cortex. And what her work showed in 2016 is every time we adjust the spine, we increase activation of that prefrontal cortex again. Now that prefrontal cortex does executive center. So if this guy's firing, it's enabling the brain to do what it's properly able to do. See, that's the thing that what people, I hope students are watching this, because if I can say anything to students, it's this. The reason we're powerful as chiropractors is because you have a direct effect on the brain. It's because of that direct effect on the brain, the recalibration of the brain, that enables the brain to do what it has to do for the body, right? So those are three studies that I honestly think everyone should be reading and just know them very well. There's a lot of other studies, but those are the three that I would highly recommend.
Yeah. And while we're talking about students, and again, I know that's your concern, that's your passion as well as mine. In order, and I want to go a little bit deeper in this, but I want to not forget to say this. So in order for them to see your full program or your full seminar, primarily they should look at the ICPA, International Chiropractic Pediatric Association, their schedule, and you have some on your own website, which is what's your website?
Yeah, people can come to my ICPA seminar. It's half neurology and half Thompson, but it's an excellent base on neurology that people should really have. If people just go to my website, minardieducation.com, they'll see all the courses.
Minardieducation.com?
Yeah, and they can see all the courses that I teach. I'm always coming up with new courses all the time, but they can see the types of courses that I teach, and they can contact me through there as well.
So you're still fired up about correcting subluxations, and you've been doing this for how long now?
I've been in practice for 18 years.
Okay, and I also asked you this when we were at Lyceum, but again, we only had a couple of minutes. At a time when the research has become so exciting and confirming what we do and really, again, giving us an even greater, showing us what a noble calling it is to be a chiropractor and to sign and correct subluxations, be good at technique, understand neurology, communicate philosophy. There's so many of our leaders, so-called leaders, and so many of the university instructors that are really trying to pull students away, sabotaging their confidence in chiropractic, sabotaging their confidence in correcting subluxations. And let me ask it a different way than I asked down at Sherman. What makes you so passionate about correcting subluxations?
Well, I mean, the easiest answer is chiropractic saved my life. You know what I mean? Like if it wasn't for a chiropractor who was a principled subluxation-based chiropractor, I would have never even been a chiropractor at all. And that, to me, when he corrected my spine when I was 17 years old, it literally changed the course of my life, and that's why I wanted to become a chiropractor. That's what started the passion. But the unfortunate thing was when I went to the school that I went to, they were very pain-based, so it was almost like dogmatic against subluxation based. No one wanted to actually have a conversation. People you're constantly bombarded with the dogma that subluxation doesn't exist. There's no science. There's no this. There's no that. But and as I grew older and did the more research myself, that was all inaccurate. And it really bothered me. And I just remember thinking to myself, I'm going to try to learn as much of this as possible and spread this knowledge as much as I can to practicing chiropractors and students so that they could actually see the truth. Unfortunately, right now, I think a lot of the profession, not all schools, I mean, if you look at people like Sherman, they're doing a great job in trying to like preserve subluxation and teach people the science and teach people the philosophy. Well, they do a great job, you know, and I wish that every school was doing that. But unfortunately, most schools are going pain-based. And because, and in my opinion, it's because they're trying to be more accepted in a medical paradigm. But the problem is we aren't in the medical paradigm. We're chiropractors. Right. You know what I mean? And we've forgotten that, you know? And I just wish that every school would teach chiropractic science, not medical science, chiropractic. What does the chiropractic adjustment do? What does the subluxation do? What happens to the brain? Why aren't we learning all these things? Right. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, I get that. Actually, I get that question. You know, I do some teaching, and that's the question I get at every seminar from students. Why aren't we learning this in college? We're paying for this huge bill for chiropractic education, and we're not getting chiropractic. And they'll come up to me on the break and say, "This is great. Why am I not learning this in school?" And I have no answer for that. I always say, go back and ask the administrator, ask your instructors.
No, exactly, which is unfortunate, right? I mean, think about it. How much do you pay at a chiropractic college? A lot of money, right? A lot of money, no matter what. And so that's why I sense the frustration. I can understand and empathize with the frustration with students when they graduate, because they think to themselves, like, you're telling me I spent $200,000 on an education and a lot of the stuff I learned was inaccurate. I'm not even a prepared chiropractor. I don't even believe in chiropractic anymore. Like, I'd be very frustrated if I was them too. And I was frustrated graduating from my own chiropractic college.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I get the frustration. All I can say is this. All of these people are highly intelligent people, and the information is there to go to seminars. And if you don't want to go to seminars, read these articles on your own. I don't know where on earth in chiropractic philosophy got separated from science, which got separated from technique. I have never, ever heard the original forefathers say, I want to only focus on technique or only focus on philosophy. Even if you look at original BJ, everyone just says, oh, BJ was a philosopher. He was, but people don't know that BJ also would adjust people and then take their blood to see what type of changes were happening inside the blood. He was trying desperately to understand the science of what was going on too.
I mean, the I can't even say it anymore. The electromentimpograph, or
right.
I don't know the name, but the guy was brilliant. That was really the first. What would you say? First study of the brain, or attempted study of the brain.
Right, and that was a chiropractor trying to figure out what was going on. He was desperate to know the science, right, to back up his philosophy. And that's what all of us should be trying to do. All of us as chiropractors.
Right, and it's undeniable once you have the skill to correct subluxations, and you're practicing, you're correcting subluxations clinically. You see those results and you're saying, well, there's a lot more going on here than just improving back pain, neck pain, headaches, leg pain.
Sure.
There's all that. I mean, those things go away quickly under chiropractic care, but the physiologic changes that you see in people, I mean, even just the simple, I've always thought to myself, what about those chiropractors that, again, are in denial of the benefits of chiropractic care? How do they explain the garden variety migraine headache going away? I mean, that's a neurological phenomenon. How would they explain that by making an adjustment?
Well, exactly. And the thing is, I've asked them that question because I've been in talks with these types of individuals. And the thing is, I'll literally ask them this, like, forget a migraine. Let's talk about pain. Let's actually talk about pain for a second. Tell me, how does pain travel to the brain? Tell me the difference between nociception and pain. Tell me what you've done decreases pain in someone's life. Like, you're pain-based. Okay, cool. Let's actually go with pain-based. How can you be pain-based if you can't describe the difference between nociception and pain? If you can't describe the difference between noxious nociception and non-noxious nociception, if you can't tell me how the brain perceives pain and what areas of the brain light up when a pain perception happens, if you don't know any of this stuff, how can you even call yourself pain-based? You don't even know science about that. And what drives me crazy is everyone wants to say pain-based is evidence-based, but that's inaccurate. That is completely inaccurate information. You know, because they're trying to say there's quote unquote evidence-based, then there's subluxation-based, like they're separate. And that's not true.
Right.
Okay? Subluxation has tons of evidence, and thankfully for us, more and more work, like people from Heidi Havoc, like Ogura's work, like Animi's work, like the people who are trying to study this, it's coming out more and more and more.
The nature of science is really a study in reality, right?
Sure, and it's never it's never ending.
Right.
What we know today might change next week, might change a week after that, or it might be more confirmed. We don't know. The science is never ending. You know what I mean? That's why it's a laugh when people sit back and say, oh, we've already done the science on that. There's no such thing. Science is always looking at the same thing over and over to either make sure that we know what's going on or we discovered something new. We used to think this, but now we know this is happening because we have better testing procedures or whatever, right? So that's why I tip my hat to people like Heidi Havoc and others in our profession that are trying trying hard to explain difficult information. Because even if you look at people like Matt McCoy, you know, here's another chiropractor, very subluxation based, and he's trying to explain to people studies that show chiropractic care and their effect on subluxation. Now, people are very quick to jump in and be like, oh, but he explained a case study or he explained a case series, or all science starts somewhere. So if you know what I mean? Like if a whole bunch of case studies say something, now you grab all that information and say, okay, let's make a bigger study on what we're finding here, right. You know? And I think unfortunately as a profession, unfortunately, we're not working as a team, right? Like everyone wants to do their own thing and everybody wants to be accepted by medicine or something like that. Like I just want chiropractic to be strong. So I want to work with the people who make chiropractic strong, period.
Absolutely. So we're probably going a little bit over time, the time that I told you we'd allocate. But
sorry, brother.
Just to wrap things up, because I know you've been in the office all day long. Take maybe 2-3 minutes, and or whatever time you choose, and just kind of going back to the question about passion. If you were sitting here with a young chiropractor, I'm a very old chiropractor. You're sitting here.
Still young at heart, brother. Still young at heart.
If you're sitting across the desk from a young chiropractor, and you were telling them, you know, not only about the studies and the philosophy, but you were encouraging them to set a strong foundation towards a career, a solid career in correcting subluxations. How would you inspire them? What would be in those 2 minutes, how would you say to these young doctors, these young graduates who are facing a mountain of debt, as we've said, and some of them are just discouraged by the education they received, as we've also noted. But how would you say, listen, you've got gold in your hand with this degree and this license, and if you set your course on the right path, you're going to have the next 50 years are going to be just awesome. How would you inspire them?
Well, quite frankly, I would tell them the truth, which is this. Every single one of these young people and every single one of us has greatness inside of them. Unfortunately, schools and other people in our lives will decrease your confidence and self-esteem so much by what they say that it can decrease your thoughts on how great you are. And I want to remind everybody that there's greatness in you and there's greatness in your hands. And the thing that I would like you to get on course with is to see how powerful the adjustment is. And the only way you'll ever see it is to become a great adjuster. So my best advice to you is to get to courses that make you a better adjuster. Go to technique courses, study under master adjusters like Tim Young, study under, like even my students, get into that ninja training and all that kind of stuff, like train constantly. Go to people like your seminars, Nick, like get those palpation skills so good that when you touch a spine, you're like, bam, I know what's going on here. The only way that happens, the only way confidence increases is with repetition, just constantly doing it again and again and again. And when you start doing that, that greatness feeling inside you will start to rise again. Your confidence will start to rise again. Unfortunately, with our students, they barely practice. They're told if they adjust anybody, they're probably going to kill someone. It's constant negativity. And then we wonder why students are crappy adjusters. You know what I mean? Like, I encourage them. Try. Because guess what? I was a crappy adjuster when I first started too. I'm sure you were too, Nick. I'm sure everybody is. That's where it is at the beginning. We're all crappy at the beginning, but we all practice. We all get better. We all learn under great instructors and great adjusters. And if your school didn't provide that type of thing for you, go to seminars where these individuals can teach you this great skill of chiropractic. You have to practice it over and over again. That's the key. That's the key.
Absolutely. You're speaking my language right there. I'm always talking about practice. And I think the hardest thing for me to see when I teach is chiropractors that have been out in the field for a while, and you can just tell working with them, they don't have any confidence, not only in palpation, but in adjusting. And I love the aha moments that you see, but it also tells me, hey, if this guy's been in practice for 20 or 25 years and really can't even find a subluxation, you know, it's wonderful to turn around and make a change, but it's got to be a hard wake-up call. And I think a lot of them just go back to their practice and then continue to just do the flying seven.
Sure. I agree. And
they're making money.
I agree. And the thing is but that has to come from an internal drive within of just trying to be great. You know, the only way you're great is by constantly honing your craft. That's the only way. You know what I mean? If you look at any great chiropractor, you look at any great tennis player, any great golfer, these guys aren't sitting on the couch. They're constantly working on their game, constantly. Right. You know, one of my big mentors in life, because of my background in martial arts, was Bruce Lee. And I watched a biography on Bruce Lee once, and his daughter showed the books that Bruce Lee had in his library, and she would open up some of the books, and Bruce Lee would take a book on fencing, you know, like fencing, and he would open that up and he'd dissect fencing, and he'd see all these scribbles inside the notes to improve his stand-up fighting, how to clear distance, how this kind of, then he'd open up a book on judo and he'd do all these notes on this to defend someone trying to take him down. This is what geniuses do. They never stop learning. They're constantly dissecting and constantly seeing what they can do to make themselves better. That's what, I don't know where we lost that. Like, I don't know what the hell happened, but we got to get that passion back to just want to be great. You know, that's the thing.
I mean, I totally agree. And I still have, but I remember my internal conversation was, I'm going to be the best chiropractor I can possibly be. I'm going to focus my whole career. If I was being told, I went to a good school, Reggie Gold School. Right. I was told subluxation is where it's at. I made that internal decision that if that's where it's at, I'm going to focus my whole career on that. Every seminar I took, every book I read, every study I read had to have something to do with neurology or adjusting or analysis, something that would improve my knowledge or improve my skills. So it's absolutely great stuff. All right, we're going to let you get to supper or whatever it is you're doing.
Thanks, brother.
I really appreciate this, and I really want to encourage anyone watching this to look for Dr. Minardi's seminars, again, through the ICPA, or again, your website was again?
MinardiEducation.com.
MINIDARI, right? Good Italian.
Yeah, that's right. And MINARDI education.com. If you just Google my name, literally just Google John Minardi, all my websites will pop up. So
awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Doc. Looking forward to seeing you sometime soon. All right. God bless. You too.